Welcome to our video on plant-rich diets based on our popular Plant-Rich Diet webinar. I'm Dr. Megan Davis. I'm the lead of the Hamilton Family Health Team Green Initiative. And it takes a team to move the needle in healthcare, and I am so lucky to have with me two other Family Health Team members, Dr. Brian McKenna, the Deputy Lead Physician, and Michelle Werstuck, who is a registered dietitian and one of our nutrition coordinators. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are presenting on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. In the Green Initiative, we recognize the essential role of Indigenous people in environmental advocacy. Let's put things into context first. Most of us, when we start the journey of thinking about the environment, we tend to automatically think about what we see, which is our garbage, and we think recycling is what I should focus my time and efforts on. But working with our invisible waste does not give us the relative results compared to the level of effort we have to put in terms of greenhouse gas emissions from healthcare consumables. Up to 90% of a product's emissions happen before we ever use them. So if we recycle our garbage, we're only modifying 10%. So we can't recycle our way out of this. Recycling is the tip of the iceberg, but under the surface of that iceberg are things that we are really, really good at in healthcare that can also improve our care and reduce our footprint, like smoking cessation, cancer screening, plant-rich eating, optimizing lung health, prescribing nature, and choosing wisely to reduce unnecessary tests and treatments that all have a carbon footprint. I want to acknowledge Dr. Andrew McNeil, a surgeon from BC, for the idea behind this image from a recent podcast of hers. This talk today is part of a series of 9 webinars. Modules 5 to 8 focus on greening our care, and today we are taping Module 6 on plant-rich diets. Early in 2022, we presented our Module 5 on meter dose inhalers. Our next webinars are planned to be Module 7 on the health benefits of nature, Module 8 on disease prevention with cancer screening and smoking cessation, and Module 9 on reduced unnecessary tests and treatments with choosing wisely. We will also deliver Modules 3 and 4 on reducing office waste and emissions. Throughout researching for this Green Initiative and implementing the changes in our own offices, we have chosen initiatives that improve the health of our patients because first and foremost, we are about high quality patient care, which just happens to also be low carbon care because it's not a choice between health and the environment, not a competition. It can improve patient care without being a competing priority. It's synergistic, leading to better patient care, more equity, better experience for patient and provider, lower healthcare costs, and much smaller environmental impact. Plant-rich eating is a great example of this synergy. When we eat plant-rich, we, first and foremost, as we will show you, there are consistent, measurable, and significant benefits to health. Also, we reduce healthcare costs with estimates up to $21 trillion annually in the US, and that reduces healthcare's environmental emissions. And finally, we reduce environmental harm from animal agriculture. It really is a quadruple win. So just what is plant-rich eating? This could include a spectrum of eating styles, from veganism to many types of vegetarianism and other eating patterns like Mediterranean diets. We use the word plant-rich as it is a continuum, less animal-based and more plant-based. I like to say progress, not perfection, is the goal. It centers around the concept of reducing meats, especially processed and red meats, and moderate dairy and egg intake. It's fundamentally about increasing fruit and vegetables and whole grain intake and receiving healthy fats and proteins from sources like nuts, seeds, and legumes. These are the main sources of plant-rich proteins: beans, nuts, legumes, seeds, soy products, and nutritional yeast, and some whole grains also have a small amount like oats and quinoa. And our patients on average are open to this conversation, as shown in this Google Trends study showing there is a growing interest around plant-rich diets like vegan and vegetarian patterns of eating. My personal clinical experience aligns with this as I've been having these conversations with my patients for over a year with really positive feedback. So let's get to it. Our slides follow this format, focusing first and foremost on high quality care that benefits our patients, then considering how this is lower carbon that can benefit the planet. First up is Brian to cover high quality and low carbon care, and then Michelle will go over key nutritional information And then I will go over the tools and resources that we have piloted in my practice to enable this easily in our busy clinical days. Take it away, Brian.
Thanks, Megan. Now let's get into some of the health evidence around benefits of eating a plant-rich diet. A typical Western diet consists of a high intake of animal-based and processed foods, as well as saturated fat and added sugars, as well as a low intake of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes. This prototypic Western diet is linked with higher morbidity and mortality worldwide and relies hugely on unsustainable practices and non-renewable resources. In summary, it's killing both us and the planet. Although dietary components are said to vary, there are three whose level of intake has been determined to account for more than 50% of deaths and 66% of disability adjusted life years. These are sodium, fruits, and whole grains. I'll explain. Research shows that suboptimal diet is responsible for more deaths than any other risk factor globally, including tobacco smoke, and that leading dietary factors in terms of mortality are diets that are high in sodium and low in grains, fruits, nuts, seeds, vegetables, and omega-3 fatty acids. Here we have a table outlining the impact of various plant-rich diet subcomponents on several major downstream health parameters, including hemoglobin A1C, cardiovascular disease, and other objective markers of metabolic syndrome, including LDL cholesterol, weight, and blood pressure. As you can see, the impact is quite literally positive across the board. In terms of overall health benefit, plant-rich diets have been shown to reduce overall mortality rates as well as systemic inflammation, with observed decreases in inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-6, as well as non-specific markers of inflammation like CRP, which is increasingly being correlated with the likelihood of coronary artery disease. Even small changes make a difference, with a 2-point increase in adherence to a Mediterranean diet based on a validated tool, resulting in an 8% reduction in overall mortality. Adherence to a plant-rich diet has been shown to also improve weight status, energy metabolism, and systemic inflammation. In terms of cardiovascular disease and atherosclerosis more specifically, the results are truly astounding. The Mediterranean diet can reduce heart attack and stroke risk by 28 to 30%, similar to statin therapy, and is as effective as statins in treating LDL and total cholesterol. Plant-rich diets should be used as a treatment component for heart failure and angina, as adherence to a plant-rich diet has been shown to positively correlate with improved ejection fraction and positive cardiac muscle remodeling. Plant-rich diets alone can halt and reverse cardiovascular disease and can decrease systolic blood pressure by 5 millimeters of mercury. Oppositely, diets high in meat confer a 61% higher risk of cardiovascular disease mortality. When lifestyle components such as a vegetarian diet were combined with exercise, stress decrease, and improvement of support systems, the majority of patients saw an improvement in stenosis. In this particular study, the intervention group also saw a 24-pound average weight loss and a 91% average reduction in angina frequency after year 1. This same program was shown to prevent the need for revascularization in the longer term, as well as to prevent recurrence of cardiac events. It is noted here that anginal symptom recurrence is the most common cause of CABG or repeat angiography, making these study results hugely significant in terms of the potential for plant-rich eating to reduce the downstream need for medical care, which from a sustainability standpoint should always be the goal. Type 2 diabetes, equally as incredible an opportunity for disease reversal. Firstly, people with low plant intake are much more likely to develop type 2 diabetes as opposed to those with long-term adherence to plant-rich diets. One study found that long-term adherence to vegetarian diets was associated with a 74% reduction in risk in terms of developing type 2 diabetes as compared to those who ate meat once or more weekly. It has also been found that individuals adherent to a plant-rich diet are often able to decrease the dosages of their medications, with plant-rich diets being independently able to reduce hemoglobin A1C by 1 to 2%. And that doesn't even include caloric restriction for people who are already eating too much. The disease-specific benefits continue. Plant-rich eating has been found to convey protection against the development of osteoporosis and to improve gut health, with consistently observed alleviation of bloating, constipation, heartburn, and diarrhea. For all of the primary care providers on this call, imagine being able to solve all of these symptoms for a patient with a dietary recommendation. Incredibly, benefits have been shown with regards to cancer too, and not just in terms of prevention, where the has been significant for quite a long period of time, but also as an adjunct to standard treatment. Plant polyphenols, a type of plant cholesterol, have been observed to have significant anti-tumor properties that you should all go and read about. Just Google plant polyphenols and cancer. Plant-rich eating may even help to prevent telomeric attrition, which, for those who don't know, telomeres are protective caps at the ends of our DNA, which are believed to enable continuous cell production and correlate with life length. Evidence has demonstrated significant benefit for mental health in terms of improved brain function and quality of life, as well as reduced symptoms of anxiety and depression. Proposed biologic mechanisms for this include reduced oxidative stress, improved neurotransmitter production via the microbiome and brain-gut microbiome axis, and improved integrity of the neuronal membrane with omega-3 fatty acids. Here we have the SMILES randomized control trial, standing for Supporting the Modification of Lifestyle in Lowered Emotional States, which is one of the first studies to look specifically at the treatment of depression using diet in adults living with major depression. They found that diet and nutrition is a feasible and effective therapeutic treatment option to improve mood in adults with major depression, and has a number needed to treat of only 4. Just to put things in perspective, the number needed to treat with statins, 104. Here we have a visual outlining the suspected mechanism of the brain-gut microbiome axis. Plant-rich diets convey significant protection from the development and progression of dementia, as well as in terms of overall mortality risk from Alzheimer's disease specifically. Now, low-carbon care. We've explained why this diet is good for our health, but why is it good for the planet? A plant-rich pattern of eating doesn't only benefit the individuals consuming them. The Eat Lancet guide has proposed a style of eating which prioritizes the consumption of plants, both for patients and the world. Dubbed the Planetary Health Diet, this pattern of eating, if adopted globally, could reduce premature mortality by 34% and have a 3 times greater greenhouse gas emissions reduction than average national food-based dietary guidelines. The critical understanding in terms of today's presentation is that not only do food systems rich in animal make us sick as human beings, but the process of generating this food is simultaneously destroying the planet, with 14.5% of all human-caused climate change resulting from animal agriculture. And it's not just about emissions. Livestock farming is also responsible for other environmental detriments, like irresponsible water use, land use, and antibiotic use, all of which pose a risk to, again, both us and the planet. Despite variability in terms of animals' impact on climate health, you will note here that in general, plant foods are much more environmentally sustainable in terms of kilogram of greenhouse gas produced per serving. So, we talked about how plant-rich eating is high quality and low carbon care. And now my friend Michelle will help us put this plan into action. Over to you, Michelle. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Brian. Let's now talk about how we can put some of this information into action for your patients. So one of the first things to consider when you're talking about plant-rich eating is food costs. And you'll hear your patients may be concerned about this, that it may end up costing more. But in fact, when you start to look at some of the literature, when they did a study in the US looking at replacing My Plate, which is very similar to our food guide, but the USDA recommended eating guide, and they changed it into a plant-based dietary pattern where there is no meat, it actually resulted into a cost savings of about $750 a year due to the cost of the lean protein. So again, they were replacing more plant-based produce and whole grains and less meats. Again, when the Eat Lancet diet also looked at calculations of food costs, it was estimated to be about $2.84 US a day in North America. And overall, when you look at the current dietary patterns in upper middle to high income countries and you switch to a more sustainable plant-rich style of eating, they estimate it would cost on average 22 to 34% less on average. If we factor in reducing food waste as well, we could potentially save another 35% on food costs. Other considerations to keep in mind are the social considerations. People do enjoy eating animal products, and we want to make sure people can continue to choose the foods they enjoy. There may be cultural considerations as well. Certain cultural practices may prohibit certain foods or include certain foods. We want to be very mindful of the cultural considerations. And of course, food preferences. Some of us just love to have things like yogurt, and we don't want to give up those foods that are important to us. So all important considerations when having discussions with your patients. Another key area is in the area of nutrients. Are there certain nutrients we need to be considering when it comes to more plant-rich eating? And in fact, there are. And iron is one of the most important minerals to be considering because it's such a common deficiency that we see in family practice, and women and children in particular are at higher risk of iron deficiency anemia, and so we need to be watching for that, particularly in certain cultural groups where there may be more of a vegetarian style of eating and actual bioavailability of iron is actually lower in a vegetarian eating or a vegan plan. Almost 5 to 12% of iron is absorbed compared to a diet that has a variety of animal proteins. You get a slightly higher absorption of about 14 to 18%, but that can translate into significant difference when it comes to women and children, where it's challenging at the best of times sometimes to get enough dietary iron. So when we start to look at plant sources of iron, there are fortified whole grains. So fortified cereals and breads are a great source of iron actually in our diet and readily available. We have dark leafy greens and vegetables that contain some amount of iron. Again, vegetables do contain phytates, which can block some of the iron absorption. So again, we may want to encourage larger portions of those vegetables to enhance the absorption. And of course, the bean and legume family, as well as nuts and seeds, all do give us some amount of iron. So a very important mineral to be mindful of, and something to really, if your patient is looking for assistance, refer them to the dietitian for more further assessment and coming up with some individualized recommendations. And then, of course, there's vitamin D, vitamin D3, which is an important vitamin for all of us, whether we eat plant-rich or not, because here in Canada, we don't get the same exposure to the sun between September and May, and the production in the skin, the levels are much lower. So we do need to think about supplementation of vitamin D3, and we do standardly recommend 1,000 international units of vitamin D3 for all adults in Canada between September and May for sure, but also for those people wearing sunscreen in the summer, because of course that blocks production. And the reason we need to supplement is because dietary sources are quite limited. It's really only in fish and milk in a diet that includes animal foods, and milk is fortified with 100 international units of vitamin D in every 8 ounce or 250 ml glass. In terms of plant sources, we can get vitamin D in our fortified milk alternatives, such as our almond milk, oat milk, etc. And of course, you get a little tiny bit of vitamin D in mushrooms as well. So you can see it's pretty limited in the food supply, and we really do need to rely on supplementation for vitamin D3. Now, calcium. Calcium is another very important mineral we all know for bone health, but also for blood pressure control. And it will depend on the style of eating whether or not your patient is consuming enough calcium in their dietary sources. So, for example, if someone is a lacto-ovo vegetarian where they have milk, cheese, and yogurt, it's easy for them to consume that 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day from food sources. As we move more into a plant-rich style of eating with fewer animal products, the calcium sources may become a bit lower. And so we do need to look to plant sources of calcium, such as fortified tofu. So again, our dark leafy greens give us calcium as well as iron. We've got baked and soybeans, chickpeas, almonds, and sesame seeds. Again, it will depend on the style of eating someone is having, whether or not they need to consider additional calcium in terms of a supplementation form. But as we all know, we try to get it from dietary sources if at all possible. And then there's B12. So this is another very common deficiency that we see in adults. They estimate about a third of adults over the age of 50 may be deficient in B12, and that can be related to a variety of different reasons, related to medication interactions, such as some of the medications we commonly see in family practice, metformin for those of our patients with diabetes, birth control pills, etc. Many different meds can interact with B12, as well as for our patients with GI issues, individuals with acidity issues or post-bariatric surgery, celiac disease. Again, changes with aging. We see gastric absorption changes with B12 with aging, and of course, the style of eating that we're consuming. So if our food pattern contains B12 sources, if it contains animal foods that have B12 sources, we should be able to get enough from our foods. But again, those other factors may be important considerations where we will require supplementation. As we get more and more into plant-rich eating and less animal foods, dietary sources of B12 are much lower. Now, we do get some from some plant-rich food sources like nori and tempeh, lion's mane, and shiitake mushrooms. They do have some, but likely most people will need to supplement with a vitamin B12 supplement if they're eating a very plant-rich diet. Really important that we, in clinical practice, screen for deficiency of B12 because it is so common, and of course supplement accordingly. We standardly use about 1,000 micrograms a day of vitamin B12 if the serum level is less than 200, indicating deficiency, and of course we retest the response to the supplementation in 3 months' time. For those people who aren't deficient but want a low dose of B12, they can supplement with lower levels of 100 to 500 micrograms a day. But when we started to look at the literature to look at nutritional deficiencies, how common are they, the Eat Lancet diet was adapted to a Danish context, and this study found that this type of eating pattern was sufficient in all areas of nutrition except for vitamin D and iodine, which was contrary to what the Eat Lancet's commission found. When they looked at deficiencies, they cautioned also that B12 may also be inadequate and require supplementation. So how do we get started with this with our patients? How do we approach this conversation? Well, the first thing to do is to ask about their nutrition. Ask about what are they already currently eating. Explain about the value of plant-rich eating pattern, that it's significant literature showing benefits on both physical health, diabetes prevention, heart health, dementia prevention, etc., as well as mental health, so prevention of depression, anxiety, and some of the other mental health conditions that we commonly see in family practice. So lots of good literature supporting the benefits of sharing this with our patients. The first step is to then set a SMART goal with our patients, something very small, very measurable, focused on action, it's realistic and timely. So asking your patient, if there's one thing you could do this week to improve your diet, to add a plant food, what could it be? And here's one example, switching a meat-containing sandwich to a peanut butter sandwich. Again, adding a plant protein to replace an animal protein. And there's lots of other ways to get started, starting very small with your patients, like adding a vegetable to their dinner, making one meatless meal a week, perhaps it's a vegetarian chili night, buying frozen vegetables to add to their meals to reduce food waste, and just simply getting them to squeeze a few more vegetables into their meals is a really good starting point to add more plants to their dietary pattern. And of course, engaging with your patients, engaging with your teams is always a good opportunity to promote this conversation about the benefit of plant sources in the diet. And this is just one example of a challenge we had here at the Hamilton Family Health Team to engage with our teams and our patients around the power of plant protein and challenge them to add one meatless meal each week and how that could benefit their health and their environment. So on that note, I'll turn it over to Megan.
Thanks, Michelle. I'd like to go over some tools that we've made. I've been using these in my own practice for about a year, and they're very well received by my patients. I've had some with diabetes, heart disease, gastrointestinal issues, and they've totally embraced plant-rich eating, have had really good health outcomes, and been really grateful that it was suggested to them. Here is a poster that you can order from our website. It is 8.5 by 11 and it's laminated. I have one in every exam room, and when I recommend Plant Rich, I use it to show the benefits. And then Canada's Food Guide is a great visual aid of the recommended components of our plate of food. And here's hands down one of my other favorite tools. It's a prescription for plants. We can give it or email it to patients. You can download it from our Hamilton Family Health Team Green Initiative website. It's also an e-form in Ocean, so I can email it with 3 clicks. I send this to pretty much every patient that I talk to about plant-rich diet. It gives them a starting list of benefits, ideas for change, and some helpful links, including our video, What's for Dinner? If this is a patient-facing video, it's just a few minutes long, and I have this running in my waiting room, and you can too. Patients do come in asking me about it after they see the video. The other video on this slide shows a provider-facing video that Brian and Michelle made to go over all the resources that we're talking about, and this video is on our website as well. Pretty much everything in this talk is on our infographic for easy reference. We go over the health benefits, the planetary benefits, and the tools. And finally, if you have access to a registered dietitian, of course, they can help your patients make this change. In the fall of 2022, we'll be offering group education for patients online, consisting of 2 sessions, each 90 minutes long, facilitated by a registered dietitian. Patients can call this number to register. No referral is needed. It's open to all patients. Alternative proteins, the health benefits of eating plant-rich, and nutritional considerations will be discussed with ample time for lots of questions. All of these tools and videos that we've just reviewed can be found on the Hamilton Family Health Team Green Initiative website. And so if you Google that, you'll find our page easily. Okay, so that was a whirlwind tour through how plant-rich eating helps with so many health concerns, from diabetes to cardiovascular to GI to mental health to overall longevity. And we've also briefly explored the huge carbon footprint of animal agriculture. And then finally, we went over some nutritional considerations and some tools, including a poster, a prescription for plants, an offer of a group information session for patients, and our infographic. If you have any questions about this content, or you'd like to learn more, maybe you want to attend our future webinars, please email our green team at the address on your screen. And thank you. Thank you so much for listening.